Dobro. History. Archive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening an exhaustive investigative dossier on an event that didn't just shock the world, but really it fundamentally altered our cultural landscape.
It absolutely did.
We're talking about the assassination of John Lennon outside the Dakota Apartment Building in New York City on December 8th, 1980.
And our source material is very clear on this. This isn't just a deep dive into a celebrity death. The sources actually define it as a seismic historical singularity.
A singularity, that's a powerful phrase. It suggests it was an event that changed the trajectory of things.
It is. I mean, that phrasing is essential. The tragedy was so much more than the loss of an icon. This event marked a definitive, brutal conclusion to the kind of open, trusting, peace and love idealism that defined the 1960s.
The idealism that kind of limped through the 70s, right?
Exactly, however tattered it was. The murder introduced a darker, much more precarious era of celebrity culture. It forced everyone, the public and public figures, to confront this terrifying new reality of obsessed fixation.
And at the center of it all is the question that's plagued everyone for over 4 decades. The motive of Mark David Chapman. The evidence, it just doesn't fit neatly into one box.
Not at all.
So, was he, at his core, a devoted fan whose adoration just curdled into this possessive mania? Or was he, as he sometimes claimed, an agent of devilish intent, driven purely by a narcissistic need for infamy?
And that's our mission today, really, to explore what our sources call the complex synthesis of those two motivations. Because the evidence strongly suggests he was both. He was a pathologically narcissistic person who, weaponized the very tools Lennon helped create.
Fandom, introspection, anti-establishment ideas.
All of it. He used it all to destroy the man who embodied them.
Yeah.
We have to dissect the timeline, the psychology, to really understand why he went from wanting an autograph to, demanding a life.
So to guide you through this, we've broken it down. First, we'll look at Lennon's personal renaissance that was so tragically cut short. Then we get into Chapman's methodical unraveling and his lethal planning.
After that, we'll walk through the minute-by-minute timeline of December 8th itself. And finally, the devastating forensic reality and the aftermath that, as we said, changed everything.
Okay, so let's set the stage.
Yep.
What was the world like as Lennon was preparing to reemerge?
Right. It's 1980, and you have to remember this was a year of profound transition in the U.S.
We were moving out of that post-Vietnam, post-Watergate haze of the 70s.
Exactly, that malaise. And heading straight into the conservative revolution, this is the year America elected Ronald Reagan. The ground was shifting politically and culturally, and Lennon was attempting this massive comeback right in the middle of it all.
And it's so important to understand just how completely he had withdrawn from the spotlight before this comeback. We're talking about the house husband years, from 75 to 1980.
5 full years. The man who basically defined global culture for a decade just retired. It's almost unimaginable.
He was living in the Dakota, that fortress-like cooperative on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It was synonymous with old money, seclusion.
And his focus became just profoundly domestic. I mean, raising his son, Sean, learning to bake bread. He was deliberately stepping away from the whole machine of fame.
The sources really emphasize that this wasn't just a break, was it? It was a psychological necessity.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
His life up to 1975 had been this constant escalating chaos. You had Beatlemania, the political battles, the Nixon deportation attempt, and then that incredibly turbulent separation from Yoko Ono.
The Lost Weekend.
The Lost Weekend, exactly. So this retreat into domesticity was a conscious protective act. He was trying to build the peace and stability he'd literally never had. He turned the Dakota from this ivory tower into a sanctuary.
Adopting routines that were the complete opposite of his rock and roll past.
He was meticulous about it. Everything centered on Sean's life school, cooking, the household. He talked about the joy of realizing he was actually good at being a parent and a partner, something he never really felt he achieved in his first marriage.
In his mind, this was his greatest success.
It was. But then, by late 1980, that creative spark, it finally came back.
What was it that catalyzed that decision to get back into music?
2 things, really, according to the sources. First, there is this profound psychological catalyst from a sailing trip to Bermuda. The isolation, the sea. It just seemed to clear his head and give him this burst of inspiration.
And the second thing was artistic.
Yes, he was reinvigorated by the new wave music scene, particularly bands like the B-52s. He felt their music had the same raw, avant-garde spirit as some of Yoko's early work, and it just compelled him to get back in the studio.
Which, of course, led to the album Double Fantasy. And this album, subtitled A Heart Play, wasn't some grand political statement. It was explicitly a musical dialogue between a husband and a wife.
A celebration of that domestic life he'd finally found. And here's where you find this deeply ironic, often forgotten piece of context about the album's initial reception.
It was lukewarm.
Lukewarm is putting it mildly. It was, even dismissive among some really key critics. It was not immediately hailed as this triumphant return of a genius.
So the very stability and peace he had fought for was exactly what he was being criticized for. That's an incredible layer of irony.
It's stunning, isn't it? Prominent critics, especially at places like Rolling Stone and The Village Voice, they found the album's themes enervated.
Drained of energy.
Right, bland. And in the most cutting reviews, embarrassingly uxorious.
That word uxorious, it's so targeted. They were literally criticizing him for being too devoted to his wife and his home life.
That's it, exactly. The critics wanted rage. They wanted the revolutionary. Instead, they saw a wealthy, middle-aged star in a fortress singing about watching the wheels go round. They mistook his psychological success for artistic failure.
So how did Lennon himself react to this, to being criticized for finding peace?
The sources show he was defiantly optimistic. He was completely undeterred. He saw Double Fantasy as the most honest work he could possibly produce at age 40. He flat out rejected the demands for nostalgia.
And in his final interviews, just hours before he died, he confirmed that.
He did. He said, and this is a quote, "The game isn't over yet. God willing, there are another 40 years of productivity to go." He was planning a massive world tour for 1981. He was looking entirely forward.
Which just makes the violent interruption of it all so much more devastating.
It really does.
So while Lennon is inside the Dakota making plans for the next 40 years, his future killer, Mark David Chapman, is meticulously planning his destruction from afar. Let's shift our focus to the antagonist.
Chapman was 25 in 1980. The psychological profiles describe him as profoundly adrift, grappling with severe emotional instability, what they call identity diffusion, and this pathological, just immense need for significance.
The significance his own life had completely failed to provide him.
Right. And if you look at the timeline of his psychological decline, what's so clear is this painful erosion of the fan into the narcissist. He started out as a genuine, devout Beatles fan.
Back in his youth in Georgia.
Exactly. He idolized Lennon, played guitar. He even worked for the YMCA for a while. There was an initial desire there for positive meaning.
So what was the turning point? What made that admiration curdle into this burning resentment?
It was a collision course, really, driven by a relentless personal failure. As Chapman's life fell apart, he dropped out of college, failed relationships, ended up in this low-wage security job in Honolulu. His admiration for Lennon just inverted.
And his fundamentalist Christian beliefs play a huge role.
A massive role. That belief system clashed violently with what he saw as Lennon's moral failures.
Specifically, the old, more popular than Jesus remark from 1966. That was a trigger.
That was always simmering in the background, yeah. It confirmed Lennon was a blasphemer in his eyes. But the real emotional fuel was the hypocrisy he perceived in Lennon's wealth.
He was enraged by the image of the man preaching imagine no possessions.
While living like a millionaire in the exclusive fortress-like Dakota, and he took Lennon's later work, especially the song God, I Don't Believe in Beatles, as a personal betrayal, a betrayal of the myth Chapman had built his own identity around.
So he transformed Lennon into the ultimate phony. And that single word became the foundation for his entire lethal philosophy.
It's the necessary dehumanization, isn't it? And this resentment of the phony found its perfect narrative scaffolding in literature. His obsession with J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye.
This is where the fan devil narrative just gets completely tangled up. He didn't just relate to the book.
No, he identified with the protagonist, Holden Caulfield, to a delusional pathological degree. He genuinely saw himself as the catcher in the rye, a self-appointed moral guardian whose mission it was to eliminate the phonies of the world.
And the sources suggest this obsession let him completely reframe the murder in his own mind. It wasn't a crime.
It was a statement of moral purification. He believed that by killing the biggest phony of them all, he would become the living embodiment of Salinger's message. He would finally achieve the significance his life so desperately lacked.
And he carried the proof of this delusion everywhere. The book itself.
The book was his talisman, his narcissist's manifesto. In the weeks leading up to the murder, he carried that specific copy constantly. He even inscribed it with a dedication.
To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield, this is my statement.
Chilling, isn't it? He was literally trying to write himself into cultural history, viewing the murder as an act of literary criticism written in blood.
Okay, let's circle back to that double path for a second, the externalization and the narcissism. Because we need to separate his claims of hearing voices from his pathological need for glory.
This is what helps us understand the mechanism of the murder. Chapman's claims of hearing voices, he called them the little people, and praying to the devil for strength, which his wife documented, that all suggests severe dissociation. It's a classic symptom of untreated psychosis.
It's a way to externalize the blame. It wasn't him doing it, it was these other forces.
Precisely. But the underlying drive, the real motor of the crime, was his pathological grandiosity.
The theology of glory.
Exactly, in a clinical sense. It's a belief system where your worth is only validated through these grand, visible, maximal acts, even if they're destructive. He needed global attention. He reasoned that killing the most revered man alive would instantly transfer that global focus onto him.
So infamy was his chosen path to immortality.
It was a desperate attempt to gain the significance his life just couldn't provide.
What's so frightening about all of this is how strategic his planning was. This completely undermines any argument that it was just some impulsive psychotic break.
The logistics of the hunt prove a clear, cold intent. Let's just trace the weapon acquisition. In October 1980, he illegally buys a Charter Arms .38 special revolver for $169 in Honolulu. He passes the background check, no problem.
Because he had no criminal record, just unreported mental health issues.
Right. But he didn't just rely on standard ammunition. And this, for me, is maybe the single most chilling detail about his intent.
He went out of his way to get hollow point bullets.
He flew all the way to Atlanta, Georgia, specifically to buy hollow point bullets from a friend, a former police officer.
And we need to be clear about why that choice is such definitive proof of intent to kill.
Well, hollow points are not for target practice. They're not for hunting. They are specifically designed as man-stopper rounds. They're engineered to expand, or mushroom, on impact with soft tissue,
So they transfer all their energy into the body.
causing catastrophic internal damage, shredding organs. It prevents a clean pass-through. His intent was, without any doubt, to cause immediate, unsalvageable death.
And we know this wasn't even his first attempt.
He had a documented dry run. Chapman flew to New York in late October 1980 with the gun, fully intending to kill Lennon then. But he chickened out, in his own words.
So he went back to Hawaii.
Lied to his wife, told her he'd thrown the gun in the ocean, but he kept it. The logistics were complete, the narrative was framed, and he came back in December with a renewed lethal resolve.
Which brings us to December 8th, 1980, a day documented with his haunting granularity. Let's start the timeline in the morning around 11 a.m.
The day began with a moment of just profound vulnerability, both artistic and personal. The photographer Annie Leibovitz arrived for a big Rolling Stone photo shoot.
She initially wanted Lennon alone for the cover.
But Lennon insisted Yoko be included. He was all about the dialogue of their relationship.
And this leads to the last professional photograph ever taken of him.
Leibovitz asked them to pose nude. Lennon stripped without hesitation, but Ono stayed fully clothed. The resulting image is so iconic, right? Lennon curled up, fetal, nude, kissing a clothed Ono. It's a portrait of a man clinging to his source of stability.
And when he saw the Polaroid of it,
He gave his final artistic approval. He said, "You've captured our relationship exactly."
then, in the early afternoon, he gave his final recorded interview.
With RKO Radio's Dave Sholin, and everyone there recalled Lennon being so charming, energetic, just full of plans. He was excited about his new diet, his family, his future. And as the interview ended, he personally walked the team to the elevator.
Just a simple, kind gesture.
A gesture that Sholin later reflected on with disbelief. He said, "Never take a day for granted, because on a dime, life can change."
And then, around 5 p.m., the couple left the Dakota for the record plant studio. As they approached their limousine, Chapman was there, waiting.
This is the historical artifact moment. Chapman is lurking outside, holding the double fantasy album. Lennon stops, does the routine gesture, signs the album. John Lennon, 1980.
And the amateur photographer Paul Gorish captures that exact moment, that chilling image of the idol and his killer, side by side.
The interaction itself was described as eerily cordial. Lennon even asked him, "Is this all you want?" And Chapman just smiled and nodded. He later said how very kind Lennon had been.
That photograph, With the signed album in Chapman's hands, that's the whole crux of the tragedy right there.
It is. Chapman later admitted to this intense inner struggle at that very moment. The fan side of him had his prize, his connection. A voice told him to just leave. But the devil, that narcissistic need for the final, total usurpation, it required the statement.
So he didn't leave. He stayed, treating it like a job shift he had to finish.
He waited for nearly 6 more hours in the cold Manhattan darkness. And during that time, he had this bizarre, almost banal conversation with the doorman, Jose Perdomo.
They talked about Hawaii.
Right, the mundane beauty of Hawaii. But also, disturbingly, they discussed the covert assassination of Cuban leaders. A strange, chilling foreshadowing. And he just waited there, armed with the .38 and his catcher manifesto.
The moment of engagement arrived at about 10:50 p.m. Lennon and Ono returned from the studio, and there was that tiny, fatal deviation in routine.
The limousine pulled up to the curb on West 72nd Street instead of driving into the secure courtyard, which they sometimes did.
And that gave Chapman the opportunity he needed.
It did. Ono got out first, then Lennon, holding a handful of cassettes from the session. As Lennon walked past him, Chapman stepped out. He was about 9 feet away. He waited until Lennon's back was exposed.
And dropped into a low combat stance.
A two-handed grip on the revolver. He fired 5 shots rapidly. The sound in that archway was mistaken for firecrackers by horrified witnesses.
Let's break down the impact and the devastation of those hollow point rounds.
The first shot missed, shattering a window. But shots 2, 3, 4, and 5 all hit Lennon. In the back, the shoulder, the left arm.
And because they were hollow points, the damage was instantaneous and irreversible.
Catastrophic and unsalvageable. The bullets mushroomed on impact. The sources detail how they shredded his left lung, severed the left subclavian artery, and violently tore the aortic arch, the main vessel carrying blood from the heart. The damage was immediate.
He didn't fall outside on the sidewalk, though.
No, he staggered up the steps into the building's vestibule trying to find sanctuary. The cassettes he was carrying scattered across the floor. A heartbreaking detail, right? The music that would never be finished.
And the concierge, Jay Hastings, saw him stumble in.
Saw him gasp, I'm shot, before he collapsed near the security booth. The scene in that lobby must have been just horrific.
Blood pouring, pooling rapidly.
He was essentially pulseless within moments. Hastings tried to apply a tourniquet, but with those kinds of wounds, severe arterial bleeding in the chest, effective first aid was impossible.
And outside, the contrast was terrifying. The violence was over, and the scene was eerily calm.
The doorman, Jose Perdomo, rushed out and confronted Chapman. Do you know what you've done? He demanded.
And Chapman's reply was just utterly devoid of emotion.
I just shot John Lennon. He dropped the gun, took off his coat and hat, sat down on the curb, opened his copy of The Catcher in the Rye, and just began to read.
The statement was complete.
Written in blood, witnessed in silence.
The NYPD response was astonishingly fast. Officers arrived within 2 minutes.
Steve Spiro and Peter Cullen, they found the scene of chaos, a screaming Yoko Ono, a dying man, and Chapman just reading on the curb, and they made a critical decision.
They didn't wait for an ambulance?
They knew it would be fatal. They saw Lennon's glazed, unresponsive state and immediately loaded him into the back of their patrol car for a high-speed ride to Roosevelt Hospital.
Officer Spiro later talked about that ride, shouting at Lennon, trying to keep him conscious.
Yelling, "Do you know who you are?" And Lennon could only manage a slight nod or a moan. But the blood loss was already overwhelming. He was bleeding out into his chest cavity.
He arrived at Roosevelt Hospital around 11:00 p.m. Clinically, he was already gone.
No pulse, no blood pressure. Dr. Stephen Lynn and the trauma team worked frantically. They started massive blood transfusions and performed a thoracotomy, cutting open the chest to manually massage the heart.
A desperate last resort.
And what they found was devastating. The blood volume was almost non-existent. The hollow points had reduced the major vessels around his heart to what Dr. Lynn described as confetti. He believed Lennon was dead at the moment that the first shots hit his body.
So despite all the frantic efforts, there was nothing to save. John Lennon was pronounced dead at 11:07 p.m. Some reports say 11:01 p.m. Cause of death, hypovolemic shock. He'd lost about 80% of his blood.
And the way the news broke to the public, it just speaks volumes about the surreal intersection of media, sport, and tragedy in 1980.
It happened during Monday Night Football.
The ultimate intrusion of violence into routine entertainment. The president of ABC News, Roone Arledge, happened to be at the hospital. He relayed the news directly to the broadcast booth, where Howard Cosell was calling a tied game.
And Cosell, with his unique dramatic delivery, just pause the entire broadcast.
He delivered that immortal, chilling quote live to millions of viewers. His tone was hushed, but firm.
Remember, this is just a football game. An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News. John Lennon, shot twice in the back, dead on arrival.
The shockwave was immediate. That sense of disbelief, of sudden loss was just profound.
And the public reaction was instant. By 1 a.m, thousands were already gathered outside the Dakota.
It was this spontaneous, overwhelming communion of grief. The Dakota, his fortress, instantly became a public shrine. Candles, singing.
Give peace a chance, imagine. All you need is love.
People just sobbing openly. And this all culminated in the global vigil 6 days later, on December 14th. Yoko Ono requested 10 minutes of silence at 2 p.m. Eastern.
In Central Park alone, over 50,000 people gathered.
Witnesses described the silence as absolute. A profound, terrifying auditory void in the middle of Manhattan. And when the 10 minutes ended, the crowd just erupted into a powerful chorus of Imagine. It was this collective global attempt to reclaim the hope that Chapman had tried to assassinate.
Okay, let's bring everything back to our core question now that we have the full tragic picture. We need to analyze that toxic convergence. The fan or devil dichotomy.
And the evidence is just overwhelming that it wasn't one or the other, but a dangerous synthesis of both.
Let's start with the fan path, the erotomania and identification. Chapman's fixation went way beyond simple admiration.
He was pathologically trying to absorb Lennon's identity. I mean, think about it. He married a woman of Japanese heritage, explicitly mirroring John and Yoko. He tried to become a musician. He even signed out of work as John Lennon.
He wanted a connection so deep it became possessive.
And when the real Lennon failed to live up to that fantasy in his head, the love just inverted to hatred, a sense of profound betrayal.
Which leads directly to the concept of possession and usurpation.
Right. By getting that autograph and then pulling the trigger, Chapman guaranteed a permanent parasitic link. He made sure that Mark David Chapman, the failed nobody, would forever be chained to the legacy of John Lennon. He couldn't create fame, so he stole it through destruction.
And then there's the devil path, the externalization and narcissism that provided the moral framework for the violence.
The claims of hearing voices, praying to the devil, that helped him dissociate from the moral weight of it all. It gave him permission. And that grandiosity fueled the pathology of glory. The belief that your worth is only achieved through some maximal external act of power.
He wanted to absorb the cultural spotlight.
Exactly. And killing the most famous man on earth would instantly confer that global significance upon him, infamy as a form of immortality.
But those devil pretenses have really eroded in his later parole hearings, haven't they? That psychological shift is critical.
It's everything. In the recent 2022 and 2025 hearings, he's largely dropped the literary and satanic masks. He admitted to the board, and I'm quoting, that he had evil in my heart. He said, "I'm not going to blame anything else. I knew what I was doing, and I knew it was evil."
And he explicitly confirmed the core motive was just pure narcissism.
That's it. He admitted that he wanted the fame so much that he was willing to sacrifice Lennon's life for it. The fan provided the target, the devil provided the permission, but the pathological desire for fame was the true lethal fuel.
So the final synthesis is the weaponization of The Catcher in the Rye. That was the bridge that unified the two pathologies.
He used the novel to construct a moral certainty. He saw the murder as the ultimate act of destroying the phony man to save the mythical purity of Lennon's early work. In his deeply disturbed mind, he was acting as a moral critic.
Literary criticism written in blood.
A truly chilling phrase.
Moving to the legal aftermath, he was charged with second-degree murder, and his lawyers were preparing this extensive insanity defense.
Based on documented delusions and depression. But Chapman insisted on overwriting them. He claimed God told him to plead guilty.
Which guaranteed his conviction. Sentence, 20 years to life.
He's been incarcerated ever since. Attica, Wenda, different facilities. He became eligible for parole in 2000 and has been denied repeatedly, 14 times as of late 2025.
The parole hearings are fascinating because you can track his psychological evolution.
You can. He's shifted to these contrite apologies in later hearings, admitting he hurt millions because he wanted the fame so much. But the board remains skeptical of his ultimate rehabilitation.
And their rationale for denial goes beyond the risk of him just killing again.
That's the key. They consistently cite his selfish disregard for human life of global consequence. But crucially, they also note the risk is not just that Chapman might reoffend. It's that someone else, another narcissist seeking notoriety, might try to kill him to achieve their own infamy.
His desire for fame created a potential perpetual cycle of celebrity violence.
That's the fear.
Now, like any high-profile assassination, this one spawned conspiracy theories we should touch on them briefly.
The two most persistent are the CIA theory and the doorman theory. The CIA theory suggests Chapman was brainwashed because of Lennon's anti-war activism, pointing to his large FBI file.
And the doorman theory.
That focused on Jose Perdomo, the doorman, who had historical links to anti-Castro operations, alleging he was some kind of handler for Chapman.
But the source material concludes these theories just crumble.
They do. They crumble under the weight of Chapman's clearly documented history of severe mental illness. His voices weren't CIA handlers, they were manifestations of untreated psychosis. And by 1980, Lennon was politically inactive. A strategic government hit seems highly unlikely.
So the ultimate devastating long-term legacy of this murder is how it permanently changed celebrity culture and security.
Before 1980, Lennon prided himself on being accessible. That accessibility died on December 8th. The event ushered in the fortress mentality we see today. Armed security details became standard for major celebrities. The world of fame instantly became more guarded, more paranoid.
And the legal systems adapted, too. Stalking laws were significantly strengthened because of this.
In a truly chilling fact, judges now use Lennon's murder as a legal precedent for the lethality of obsessed fixation. The sources note it's frequently cited in modern cases, like those targeting figures like Rihanna, to emphasize the inherent danger posed by fans whose admiration has curdled into possessive rage.
So in the end, the tragedy lies in that profound juxtaposition of Lennon's final act of Grace signing the autograph, offering that connection, and Chapman repaying it with hollow point bullets.
The fans sought connection, but the devil, the desperate narcissist, sought usurpation. By pulling that trigger, Chapman ensured a permanent parasitic link to the man whose life and fame he coveted so much.
The dream of the 1960s was complex. It was already tattered by Vietnam and Altamont. But the final, definitive end to that era's innocence, the absolute shattering of peace and love idealism. It didn't happen in a crowd or on a battlefield.
It died on a New York sidewalk, in the shadow of the Dakota, with the man who wrote Imagine lying bleeding in a vestibule, his finished cassettes scattered on the floor.
We've looked at the evidence that Chapman was highly strategic, the hollow points, the dry run, but also profoundly delusional, driven by his self-appointed role as the catcher in the rye.
It's that mix that's so terrifying.
So we'll leave you with this provocative thought. In our current age of extreme public adoration and instant digital visibility, what balance of premeditation and pathology is truly the most dangerous? Was it the hatred of the phony, the resentment that spurred the catcher delusion, or was it the pathological, calculated desire for fame that was the truly lethal ingredient that night?
Something to ponder as you look out at the world today and consider the enduring and often brutal cost of fame.
That was the deep dive. We'll see you next time.